up, everybody? Welcome to the Prime Sports Podcast. This is your host, Steve Marquez. Joining me is our co-host, Tony Sutton. Unfortunately, we don't have Pete Rios and Blake Elijah with us this week. Our schedules with work are getting a little mixed up, so it's getting a little more difficult to get everybody on the same day. But we're figuring it out, so hopefully we should have it down by the next episode. But you know, it's been kind of a weird week, Tony, especially with Damar Hamlin's injury, and I kind of want to focus on that because we're going to have a different setup of how we're doing the podcast tonight. And obviously on Monday night, the Cincinnati Bengals were playing the Buffalo Bills in what looked like a routine tackle, something you see basically on every play, where T. Higgins has the ball and he runs into Damar Hamlin. Damar Hamlin tackles him to the ground, gets up, and just collapses in what was an extremely frightening and scary situation. And he was on the field for about 20 minutes. They needed to give him CPR. He wasn't responsive, and it looked like he took a hit to the chest. Have you ever seen anything like this, and what did you make of that situation?
I've seen not something like this. I've seen some pretty gruesome injuries in all kinds of different sports. We had a kid in Minnesota not too long, it was probably like almost 10 years ago now, that received a really serious injury in a high school game of hockey, and that was all over the news cycle here. But not like this with a national audience, and not with someone's heart stopping and needing to have CPR performed on them. Not something where they had to bring an ambulance onto the field to help get him out of there. The whole situation is really just tragic and unprecedented. I don't think anybody knows what to do, but I just hope that he pulls through. I have a feeling that he's going to pull through. I hope he does. But no, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
Yeah, like I said, it was an extremely scary situation, and those moments right after it happened, and throughout the night while everybody was anxiously waiting to see what was happening with him, there wasn't a lot of updates. Obviously, we know that his heart stopped. We know that he wasn't breathing on his own. He needed help in order to breathe, and it wasn't looking good for him for a little bit. But within the last couple of days, it looks like he's starting to improve little by little, and hopefully he can improve, and he can make it out of this scary situation. Damar Hamlin is obviously not just a football player, but a human being, and that's kind of been a big topic within the sports world after this happened, is how do we take care of our players, and how do we react to a situation like that? And you've seen someone like Skip Bayless, who you put out an insensitive tweet talking about the ramifications of the game being postponed, because the game was ultimately postponed after his injury, because who could play after something that happened like that? Like, that'd be too painful for the players, especially the Bills players. So it's like, I don't know. What do you think was the right course of action to do here, and how does that affect the rest of the league going forward?
Well, I think that ultimately the players and coaching staffs decided to do the right thing, which was to not continue to play, and that the NFL eventually reached the correct decision, which was to postpone the game. I'm glad that they haven't tried to make this a flexed-in Thursday night game or an additional Saturday night game to give them another primetime showing and recoup their losses. So I'm glad that we're not doing something like that. Ultimately, what it means for the NFL going forward is I think that there is a whole new awareness about severe injuries. Now, the big conversation this year has been around concussion protocols, head trauma, with what we saw with Tua Tagovailoa earlier this season, and even later in this season within the last couple of games. That Green Bay game, nobody really thought about it until it came out after the fact that he had concussion-like symptoms. So although this is a different kind of injury with the hit to his chest, it was a freak injury from what I've been told. I've been told that it really takes a very specific set of circumstances for something like this to happen. But nevertheless, the focus right now is on player safety, player health, how to minimize these injuries that are potentially life-altering. We were talking about it earlier this year with the grass versus the turf. What turf is bad, what causes players to get more ACL, MCL injuries that, are life-altering for these players. These are serious surgeries that they have to get. But it also affects them financially. It affects the league in a negative way where they don't have their best players playing every single game. So I think the NFL is going to have to face this offseason with the question of how do we make the game truly safer for the players to a point where they can have both the best product on the field and the best working environments for their employees. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of solutions they come up with. If they're able to reach any kind of solution at all is yet to be seen.
Yeah, I think it's important, like you said, to really focus in on the player's health, because there are a lot of key players, a lot of star players that miss a lot of time, and ultimately it does affect how fans view the game. And we even talk about it with our power rankings, trying to figure out how good a team is, and it's hard to base it or judge it if their star quarterback isn't playing or if their star defender isn't there. So I think it's definitely important that we find a good balance of keeping the integrity and the core of the game intact, but we're keeping our players safe and healthy, because that's ultimately what matters. So we're definitely praying for Damar. We're hoping that he recovers quickly and he heals, as good as possible. We're going to talk about the impacts that it has towards the playoffs, because obviously the Bills and the Bengals are two of the top AFC teams a little bit later during our playoff picture. Tony, what do you make of how sports media reacts to news like this? Obviously, when you're in this kind of field, you want to make the headlines, you want to put out the news as quick as possible. You want to get the most clicks, you want to get the most views, the most likes, you want to get people talking. But how do you approach a situation like this? Because
we saw what happened with Skip Bayless.
Yeah,
And the thing about it is from everything I've read on his Twitter and everything he said on Undisputed, I'll say this, is that what Skip Bayless did was he was trying to do his job. He was trying to kind of have this almost sort of stream of consciousness tweeting going on during the long intermission between when the game was officially canceled and the injury itself happened. And I think in that stream of consciousness, he made some insensitive remarks and sent a tweet out he probably shouldn't have sent out. He should have proofread it a little bit instead of just letting the thumbs do the talking. But what I will say is, despite the fact that he was trying to do his job, he was being an analyst before he was being a person. And I think that's where a lot of these analysts get it wrong, is they're so obsessed and maybe a little too committed to the job and the way they view the sport and the kind of opinions they have about the sports that they cover, before they see these athletes as other human beings working just like them, facing trials and tribulations just like them, trying to be the best for their families just like them. And we kind of grew up in a real desensitized era with all of this sports journalism, all of these stats, all of these games. You have fantasy, Madden, all the different sports games. And it's easy for these players to become numbers or statistics, but the right thing to do, the correct thing to do, is to see it and take it for the human value that it is, and that these are real humans out there competing at the highest level, putting their body in harm's way for our entertainment. And ultimately, it's about those people before it's about any game or any kind of statistics or how it affects the future games, playoffs, championships. None of that matters without the people playing the sport.
Yeah, no, I definitely think there's a fine line in trying to get your point across, and like you said, kind of being decent. You just realizing you kind of have to be human at some point. And I also bring that up because just all the backlash that T. Higgins was receiving. I mean, he was getting death threats. People were blaming him. Like, I mean,
that shit's just as unacceptable, if not worse.
Exactly. And that's kind of my point of in this sports media world right now with Twitter and Instagram and all these avenues that everybody has available. I feel like it's hard to find a good balance sometimes because you have people just doing whatever they want to do and say whatever they want to say just for the simple fact that they want to get some clout out of it. And it's unfortunate, but I think it's important that for the majority of us who do care, try and show our viewers and our listeners that we can see both sides and, you know, we can appreciate the fact that at the end of the day, it's just a sport. It's just football. We care about everybody that's involved with football because it's something that we all love and we all care about. So, you know, again, prayers up for Damar Hamlin. And that being said, I think we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come right back.
To fall off and recover under this route, but an easy pick.
Fifth career interception for Hamlin, who went to Central Catholic.
Welcome back, everybody. Getting started with our next segment. We're going to look at the Week 18 schedule, and we're going to look more specifically the key matchups from this coming weekend as the playoffs are obviously a couple weeks away. So we want to start with our AFC teams. Tony, tell me a little bit about this Titans and Jaguars matchup. Winner obviously wins the division and makes it to the playoffs. Jaguars started off extremely slow and they started to pick it up towards the end. Trevor Lawrence is playing amazing, and the Titans kind of have fizzled out. They've gone in little streaks where they were playing good, and now they've been playing really bad recently. Who do you think wins this matchup, and why is this so important? Because the Jaguars look kind of scary going towards the playoffs.
Yeah, well, first off, I want to say I think that the Jaguars will most likely win this game. And a huge part of that is going to be the simple fact that I don't think the Titans are committed to winning these last handful of games. They benched a majority of their starters last week against the Cowboys here. And I've heard that despite Derrick Henry being a full participant in practice this week, that there's a strong possibility that he doesn't start this game. And that's going to be a huge blow to the Titans' chance of winning this game at all. Meanwhile, the Jags, I feel like, are trying to continue the momentum going into the playoffs, finish the year with a over 500 record, being 9-8, and just thoroughly win the division here, leave no doubt. I still don't understand why the Texans aren't going to be playing their starters. They didn't even want to play their QB2 in Malik Willis last week. So it's a bit of a brain scratcher here, especially because the Titans still have a chance. If they want to make the playoffs, they'll need help. But I still think the Jaguars are going to win this game handedly. Probably a multiple score game here. Probably pretty similar to the Cowboys game last week.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the Jaguars have just been playing extremely well recently, and Trevor Lawrence, he's finally looking like that quarterback that we were all expecting him to be. We know his rookie year obviously didn't go so well, and part of that was coaching. I mean, he had Urban Meyer. Can you blame him? But with
Right.
Doug Peterson, he's really turned a corner and he's really showing flashes, and people are even talking about him as one of those irreplaceable QBs already. And I think, like you said, they ride that momentum, and I think this is a blowout. Like you said, the Titans have obviously been a team who have been dealing with a lot of injuries. They just haven't looked like a team that is trying to win at this point. And if they somehow manage to bring Josh Dobbs in and beat the Jaguars in Jacksonville, then hats off to them, and they deserve that division. But I see this being a pretty easy win, a pretty big win for Jacksonville. Also, maybe like a 2-score, 14, 17-point score game. Tony, our next matchup that we want to look at here is the Ravens and the Bengals. Now, obviously, the Bengals weren't able to finish the game last week against the Bills, so we're not quite sure what to expect of them at this point. But this was another interesting game because this was a game that if the Ravens won, they could win the division. And because of the postponement of the Bills game, I don't think they're able to win that game anymore. And they're probably locked in at the wild card spot. But what do we make of the Ravens? And do we expect them to come out full force trying to win this game? And do you think Lamar Jackson plays? Because it seems like he didn't practice again today. And I'm not quite sure what to make of this Lamar injury at this point. Because I know I've heard that this was supposed to be a 4-week injury max, and it's been like 5 or 6 weeks at this point. So is there something more to this, or are we just looking a little too deep into it?
Well, I do think that this game is should be important here, but I think due to some of the circumstances that have happened, if this Bengals-Bills game does get canceled, they don't play, they just agree to wipe it from the record here. I don't know what the word is, but it's on the tip of my tongue. But anyways, that doesn't matter. If they decide to do that here, then yes, the Ravens cannot win the division. However, I do expect them to come out and play as if they can win the division if they win this game here. It is a little interesting to see how it's going to go for them with the Lamar Jackson injury. And there are some grumblings, if not just flat out rumors, that Lamar Jackson is sitting out on this team in hopes of getting a contract. Why potentially get himself injured, rushing back from an injury when he doesn't have guaranteed money next year? So there is the kind of conspiracy that Lamar Jackson's doing that. I think Lamar Jackson wants a playoff victory more than he wants a max salary. I think can say that of his character and what we see from him here. This guy really just wants to win football games, and he takes it more personally when he loses those games than when he's not getting the money that he wants. I think it affects him a lot more. So if we don't see him this week, I could almost guarantee you that we're going to see him play during Wild Card Weekend. Who he's going to be playing against remains to be seen, especially with the potential canceled game or game that's pushed back a week. I don't think any of the Bengals or the Ravens know who they're going to be seeing in the playoffs round one, but I think they all know that they're going into the playoffs and that they would rather play a game at home than away. So I think it'll still be a competitive game. I don't think we're going to see the Ravens come out of this game with a win, though. I think it'll be a very competitive, close game. We'll probably see the best Tyler Huntley game we've seen all season But ultimately, I think that the Bengals are going to be able to rally, win something like a 24-20, 24-21 real close game.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Bengals win this game also. As far as Lamar Jackson goes, I think he's too competitive of a player to just sit it out. You know, like you said, there's rumors and people talk, but I think he just wants to be healthy enough for the playoffs because, like you mentioned, I think that's the most important thing to him is he needs to win playoff games. That's the one knock that he has is that he doesn't win enough playoff games. And so I think right now he's just trying to focus on being healthy enough for the playoffs now that he knows they're in for sure. And the Ravens with Tyler Huntley are still competitive. So I think it's important for them to come out and show the Bengals that they're not just going to bend over and hand them the division, that they're going to compete, that they're going to show that they're one of the scarier teams going into the playoffs, even though they're just a wild card team. But I've said it all season long, a lot, and very similarly to the 49ers, the Bengals are just one of those teams that I'd be scared to play. I think they're a really good team. I think they're arguably the best team in the AFC right now, and Joe Burrow is playing lights out. They're starting to get a little bit healthier. So I think the Bengals win the division. I think they come out winning probably, I don't know, 27-20.
Yeah.
But beware of the Bengals because I think they're a little salty from last season's exit. And, you know, a lot of people were talking about how they were going to start to decline and they're going to have that hangover and that they're not going to return. And I'm not saying that they will, but I know that they're playing like they want to get back there. So
it's funny because they're the ones that didn't even get the hangover. The Rams got the worst hangover I've ever seen.
I mean, in history, they have the most losses for a team that won the Super Bowl the previous year of all time. 11 losses.
That's what happens when you buy the roster.
I mean, they went all in. They went all in and it
ring.
worked. It worked. They got their ring, but now they're struggling. I mean, real quick, to not get too far off topic, do you think the Rams, given they get healthy and probably, you know, fill in some of those positions that they're lacking in, do you think they can return to a contending form?
I'm not sure if contending is the word, but I think they could be a wild card team with the bare bones of what the team once was, and depending on if everybody's fully healthy, then you still look at, you know, three guys who are all phenomenal top five at their position. You have, you know, Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, and Jalen Ramsey, all guys who can be, when they're healthy, top five at their position, generational talented players. We saw them win a Super Bowl with that formula and Matt Stafford at the helm. They just got to fill in the rest of the spots there and have those guys be healthy. We'll see what another year on those three guys does to them, especially a guy like Aaron Donald, especially Matt Stafford after an injury to his elbow and then being shut down for the season. We'll see, but I could still see them being a 10-plus win team for sure with those guys.
Yeah, I think this next season is really going to determine their entire future. They're just, like you said, a lot of their key players are older players. So what if they don't perform next season? What does Aaron Donald do? There was already whispers about him wanting to retire before he made this 3-year extension deal with them. Stafford, I mean, he deals with so many injuries on a consistent basis, and he just did not look good this season, even when he was quote unquote healthy. So if they have another bad season, what does that mean for the Rams? Because they don't have draft picks. They don't have that.
Here's what I think happens is that a lot of those guys are kind of more or less stuck with the Rams. Aaron Gordon, I could see getting out by retiring. But Jalen Ramsey and Cooper Kupp have signed long contracts with this team very recently. And if Matt Stafford is declining, I could see them either sticking with him through the decline or potentially just cutting him. And with the way the quarterback market is, who knows if he'll be able to get on another playoff team. But I think the key piece that leaves, if they have another losing season, would probably be Sean McVay. Sean McVay isn't much older than a lot of these players, and he's a proven good coach. He's been able to take this team to 2 Super Bowl appearances. One of them has been playoff relevant for the most part since joining the team. And he took over the Rams, who were a dumpster fire for 10 years. He was able to turn them around, install his own coaching philosophy and culture in that locker room, bring the best out of guys like Jared Goff, bring the best out of guys like Matt Stafford, Cooper Kupp. He developed talent there.
Yeah.
And if he decides to become a coaching free agent, that could potentially change the landscape of the NFL. You know, we say how many teams are a quarterback away. Think about how many teams are a coach away.
No, yeah.
Imagine if the Raiders had Sean McVay. Think about Derek Carr with Sean McVay as his head coach. Think about that.
That'd been nice, knowing how many head coaches and offensive coordinators Derek Carr has had to deal with. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. I do agree that Sean McVay is a piece that could be the first to leave if things really go south next season. But maybe we see Jalen Ramsey being moved.
I can probably say he's the player that probably gets traded the easiest out of them.
That's what I'm saying. He's declining. He's expensive. He's obviously still good, so he's still going to have a market. But if you need help, is that a piece you could possibly?
If I was the Vikings, I'd trade for Jalen Ramsey today. Obviously, the trade deadline.
A second?
Yeah, I'd give up.
Would you give up a first?
I'd probably give up a first too. I mean, what did they trade for him? Like 2 firsts and a fourth?
I think something like that.
They give up multiple picks to get him. If we have to take on most of his salary, I feel like I'd rather send a second. But I mean, Patrick Peterson and Jalen Ramsey as your backfield or as your secondary with Harrison Smith. You can squeeze another year or 2 out of that unit before it gets rough. But I think it would help the Vikings a lot just to have someone else back there that's been to a Pro Bowl.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a dying need for the Vikings, obviously. So
yeah,
that would be an interesting little, I don't know, trade rumor. I mean, I would like to see it. That seems like a good fit.
I'm pushing the narrative now. For the whole offseason, I'm pushing the narrative.
Jalen Ramsey to the Vikings.
Yep, it's coming. It's happening. But let's get back on track here. We had another game we were going to cover out in the AFC, and I want to know your thoughts on it. The Patriots against the Bills. NFC matchup here. The Bills being the other team that may or may not be replaying or continuing play of the game that was cut short this recent week here. The Patriots can still make the playoffs. There's a couple of AFC teams right now that are vying for that last playoff spot. The Dolphins, Steelers, Patriots, and I think it's just those 3 teams.
Are all the ones eliminated?
I don't think the Jets are eliminated, but they probably need the most help, and they play the Dolphins.
Yeah, the Jets play the Dolphins.
Those teams are all have to do a little something to get into the last playoff spot.
Yeah.
And I think this Patriots-Bills game could shift that a lot, because if the Bills lose this and the Patriots win, I think that may just screw over either both or one of the Jets and the Dolphins because of interconference play. The Jets and the Dolphins have to play each other. The Bills can afford the L, but I don't think the Jets or the Dolphins can afford losing to one another and having the Patriots win.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I could see the Patriots winning this game.
I'm gonna be honest. I'm on the opposite end that you are. I don't see the Patriots winning this game, especially with the Damar Hamlin injury. I think the Bills are going to come out swinging. I think they're going to try and make a statement. Now, maybe they might be a little bit too emotional, and maybe that might backfire, and the Patriots end up winning this game. But I have a feeling the Bills are just going to come out swinging, and they're going to win this one for Damar Hamlin. I can almost guarantee it. So that being said, I think with the Patriots losing, that opens the door for the Jets, who I think will end up beating the Dolphins. And I think the Patriots and the Dolphins end up missing the playoffs, and the Jets squeeze in. That
Mike White plays a playoff game. He starts a playoff game.
So. I think
that would be.
I don't feel confident about the Dolphins. And is Tua playing? I'm not sure.
I don't think Tua is playing. Because didn't they pick up Mike Glennon?
I think so. So, yeah, exactly. Now they don't have Tua. They're obviously not winning with Skylar Thompson or Teddy Bridgewater. And like I said, I think the Patriots, I just don't think they're going to beat the Bills. Even though I would probably pick the Patriots to beat the Jets and the Dolphins right now, I don't think they're going to beat the Bills, and I think the Jets are going to just squeeze it out and beat the Dolphins and make the playoffs. That's my prediction.
That's a good prediction. You're low-key convincing me of it, but I don't know why. Maybe it's because I think Bill Belichick is evil or something, but he's going to use the Bills' emotions against them and shit and call the most ridiculous game against them where he just takes away Diggs or takes away somebody, and Josh Allen I don't know. It's just this weird feeling about a late season game for Bill Belichick to be the spoiler, to piss off the Dolphins and Jets, who he's been pissing off for the better part of 20 years.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think somehow Belichick's gonna weasel his way into a playoff game, and we're all just gonna be like, can we just get rid of these guys yet?
Yeah.
But you're probably right, but I like my idea better.
No, I like it. I think that's a good take, and it's possible. At the end of the day, it's Bill Belichick. You can't take what he's done for granted and assume he's just gonna bow down to the Bills. And like you said, I think he gets enjoyment in knowing that, hey, Jets and Dolphins, I've owned you guys. I don't have Tom Brady, and I can still own you guys. And I feel like that's a statement he would like to make. So it'll be interesting to see that game. Moving over to the NFC side, Tony. Obviously, we don't have Pete here to talk to us about his team, but the Cowboys have been playing well. And last week, the Cowboys were the only team to win out of all four of our teams. The Raiders, the Ravens, and the Vikings obviously lost. So I know Pete wanted to be here to talk his shit. But the Cowboys are obviously playing well. They're scoring a lot of points. They're very high-powered, and they're playing one of their NFC East division rivals, the Commanders, who are starting Taylor Heineke because Carson Wentz is trash. He shouldn't have even started the last game, but I guess you have to try something to spark your team. What do you make of this matchup in a Cowboys team that, look, I'm going to be 100% honest with you, and I know Pete thinks I hate the Cowboys, but I'm still not 100% sold on them. They have more of a feeling of being the same old Cowboys than being a different Cowboys. That being said, I think they win this game. I do think they're a good team, but their defense hasn't been playing as well. Dak still turns the ball over, and granted, not all of them are his fault, and the coaching at times still somewhat questionable. What do you make of the Cowboys and of this matchup?
Well, I think this matchup goes hand in hand with the other NFC East game, the Giants and the Eagles, because the Cowboys are playing this game for the 1 seed here. They'll need help from the Eagles and Giants game, but to get a bye week and then a home playoff game would be huge for this Cowboys team, because there is a lot of upset potential in the first round with how the wild card and divisional spaces have gone thus far. There's a lot of room for upsets here. A lot of people are scared of Brady, scared of Rodgers potentially upsetting them in the wild card round. If you win and the Eagles lose here, all of a sudden you don't have to worry about that stuff. You get to see how it shakes out, and you're ultimately still going to play the lowest seeded team that week at home. So if Rodgers or Brady can somehow pull off an upset, you'll still have to see them, but now you've seen what their kind of playoff plan is. You've got more footage on them. It just gives you more of a tactical advantage. So I think the Cowboys are going to come in highly motivated. Despite all the turnovers, their offense has been explosive. Putting up multiple 30, 40-plus point games since Dak's come back. They've looked good defensively when they didn't have to rely on Dak as much to win them games. Now Dak is the one winning them games, as opposed to earlier in the season when it was the defense. To have that kind of balance where your offense or your defense can win you games in different parts of the season is huge come playoff time. So I expect them to come in highly motivated and take care of the Commanders and avoid another trap game this year. And to piggyback off of that, I think that the Giants are actually going to lose to the Eagles. I don't think they're going to beat the Eagles. I think Gardner Minshew has a bit of a bounce back game. I think that the Giants
is Minshew the confirmed starter?
I'm assuming he's the starter. I'm not sure if that's been 100% confirmed yet, but I'm assuming that for the most part, I'm fairly confident that Gardner Minshew is going to be the starter. He had a really good game against the Cowboys. This last week's loss to, was it the Panthers, I believe? Or was it the Saints? Which NFC South team was it? I think it was the Saints. I could be wrong.
Saints.
It was the Saints, I'm pretty sure.
The Saints beat the Eagles 2010.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we're going to see Gardner Minshew get shut down by the defense here, just because the Giants' defense has been pretty inconsistent this season. A far improvement from last year, but inconsistent in a similar way that the Cowboys' defense is inconsistent, even if not even more inconsistent. So I think the Eagles win and spoil the Cowboys' fun. They're still going to have to play a road playoff game, but it'll still be some pretty good football being played. But I don't see the Eagles losing a game that wins them the 1 seed here. I just don't.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Giants, they had a little bit of a fall off that we kind of underestimated them again, and we thought they were done for. But they're playing well, and I think they're going to come in and play a good game against the Eagles. But I agree in the sense that I don't think Minshew or Hurts, whoever the quarterback is, I don't think the Eagles lose this game. I think it's important to them to get that 1 seed and get that bye. Because, like you mentioned, getting that home field advantage is important, and having to go into Tampa Bay to play the Bucs, even though they're a low seed, but now they have home advantage, that's kind of a scary thing. So I think it's an important game for the Cowboys and the Eagles that they both are going to want to win it. But I think the Eagles win it probably 24-20 against the Giants also. But it like you said, it's going to be good football, good playoff football, and it's something that I think is going to make everybody excited for these playoff matchups. Our last NFC game that I wanted to talk about, the Lions and the Packers. Obviously, they're your NFC North division rivals. Winner basically goes to the playoffs, if I'm correct, as a wild card. And the Packers are playing well as of late, and they've done everything right. They've gotten everything that they've needed to fall their way, and obviously they beat your Vikings last week. JJ got sunned by Jair, but what do you make of this game? Who do you think wins? Because this is an interesting matchup between a surprisingly good Lions team and an extremely hot, as of late, Packers team.
This is going to be the best game of the week by far here. And I'm also pretty confident that I know how this game's going to go because you've seen it a million times. You know what to expect. I don't even have to say what's going to happen because everybody's thinking the same thing that I'm thinking.
Yeah.
No,
I'm pretty sure.
Oh, man. It's in Lambeau. It's the Lions. It's Aaron Rodgers. It's for a playoff spot after underperforming for half of a season. Where have we seen this before? All over the place. This is Aaron bleeping Rodgers. This is one bad son of a gun, Aaron Rodgers. And I hate Aaron Rodgers. All right? Everybody here hates Aaron Rodgers, but they know damn well that it's Aaron fucking Rodgers. Like he told Soldier Field that he still owns them, and then went back and beat him again and just chuckled about it. And it was like, oh yeah, it's all good fun. No, he's historically owned the NFC North. We lose a game to him every season, and he just makes us look like shit because he knows us all so well. And I don't think Jared Goff has it in him to finish the mission. And I think that it might be time to move off of Goff if I'm the Lions and draft a quarterback. You know, they have draft capital. I think that you draft a quarterback and sit him behind Goff.
Yeah.
Because Goff's not a scrub. He's not bad. With a great team around him, we've seen him take a team to the Super Bowl. So I don't think he's bad. But I also don't think that he's the hero Detroit needs right now. They've got the pieces. They're all kind of starting to click and develop, and you're seeing the fruits of the labor. You bring in a young quarterback on a rookie deal that can replicate, if not do better than Jared Goff, and you have all of this space for more weapons, better defensive pieces, a better secondary, because you have a quarterback on their rookie deal. And you could be saying, oh, the Lions are contenders in 2-3 years. So I think that it would be the best thing for the future for the Lions to lose this game to the Packers. And I think that that's what's going to happen. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to come in. The Lions are going to make it close. They're going to make him work for it. But he's going to throw 2, 3, 4 touchdowns. You know, somewhere around 300 passing yards. No interceptions. Classic textbook Rodgers game with a drive in the fourth quarter to seal the deal.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it right on the mark. I think the Packers are just riding this momentum. This Aaron Rodgers. Who knows? We don't know if he comes back to play for the Packers or even at all next season. But I think the writing's in the wall. Like you said, it's typical Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay Packers fashion. Playoff spot on the line. It's in Lambeau. And I don't want to discredit Jared Goff because a lot of people have written Jared Goff off for a long, long time already with the Rams, with the Lions. And I think you're on the right road where the Lions should draft a young quarterback. Hopefully they can get a decent prospect to sit in behind Jared Goff. But I think with Jared Goff, they can still win and succeed because he's really shown that he can do that against almost any team this season. And I wish we could have a Cinderella story, a Cinderella team for each and every season, for each and every conference, because we love the Lions. We love We love them ever since they were on Hard Knocks and we saw Jamal Williams cry and give that speech. We love Dan Campbell's energy. Okay, maybe not you. But the point is they're one of those young teams that excite and we want to see in the playoffs. But I agree, they're not quite ready, and I think Aaron Rodgers is going to spoil that. Now, is it a blowout? I don't think so. I'm kind of torn on, does Rodgers just go off for 4 touchdowns and they win that game 34-23? Or is it a close game? Packers are down 3 in the fourth quarter with under 2 minutes, and Aaron Rodgers does his thing and just drives down the field in a minute and wins it to go to the playoffs. Yeah,
I think Rodgers has a big game
one.
Because the Lions can put up points.
Yeah,
they've shown that much, is that they have a good offense here. I just think that their defense outside of, their front 7 is really rough. And even in their linebacking unit too, they're a little thin there too. So
yeah,
I did say it though earlier this year. I said the Lions' momentum could start to stall out. They might have burned out a little too quickly. And I think we might be seeing the fruition of that just a little bit here, where they're good enough to be in the conversation of sneaking in and causing some mayhem, and they just can't quite get it because some good teams are going to miss the playoffs this year.
Yeah, no, that's for sure.
The Seahawks, the Commanders, all have played very well this year in the NFC. In the AFC, we're going to be missing 2 of those 3 other AFC East teams.
Yeah,
and there's still
Jets, Patriots,
the small chance that the Steelers get in, and none of those other teams make it in. So some good teams are going to miss out on the playoffs this year, and I really think that it's been great for football to have that 3rd wild card team, because we're getting down in the stretch. It's the last week of football, and we have no clue who's going to be those last 2 playoff spots.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting weekend of football that a lot of people are going to have their eyes on a lot of these key matchups because, like you said, there's so many different games that could potentially have a different outcome on who makes it to the playoffs. It's not, it's not a defined answer on if it's the Dolphins or the Jets or, like you said, the Commanders or the Giants, or who's winning the 1 seed. So it's gonna be an exciting weekend. I think that's pretty much all our biggest matchups that we wanted to cover. We're gonna take one last break and then we're gonna jump into the 15 Hall of Fame finalists that were announced, and we're gonna give you guys our lists on who we think should make it and who we think is on the outside looking in. So we're going to take that little break, and then we'll be right back with you guys.
In the middle, he passes the first wave, and here he goes. It's Hester inside the 30. Hester's going to take it all the way for a touchdown.
Welcome back, everybody, to our last segment. We're going to go ahead and talk about the 15 Hall of Fame finalists that were just announced for the 2023 Hall of Fame enshrinement. Tony, I'm going to read off the list first, and then I want us to bounce off our list that we picked about 5-6 players each that we would like to see go in. But here's the list. Starting off is Jared Allen. Obviously, you know him. He's one of my favorite defensive ends of all time. Excuse me. He played with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Minnesota Vikings. Great player, maybe even a better celebration. He also played with the Bears and the Panthers to end his career. Willie Anderson, offensive tackle who played for most of his career with the Bengals and then with the Ravens on his final season in 2008. We also had Rondé Barber, as everybody knows, the corner, sometimes safety DB for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He played from 1997 to 2012. Dwight Freeney, the defensive end for the Colts, who played with them from 2002 to 2012. He also played with the Chargers, the Cardinals, the Falcons, the Lions, and the Seahawks as he bounced around right at the end of his career. Devin Hester, arguably,
Big surprise.
Arguably, if maybe not arguably, the greatest returner of all time. Played with the Bears, the Falcons, the Ravens, and the Seahawks, but obviously his years with the Chicago Bears, he low-key led them to a Super Bowl with just his return ability, some could say. But, yeah, glad to see him on there. Torrey Holt, big-time Rams and Jaguars receiver, obviously ended his year with the Jags, but spent all those years with the Rams, Kurt Warner, with Isaac Bruce, Steven Jackson. So another good receiver who's one of my favorite receivers during his time was Andre Johnson, his time with the Texans. He spent some time with the Colts and the Titans. Very familiar with the AFC South division, but Andre Johnson was a beast. Albert Lewis, the corner for the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles/Oakland Raiders back in the 90s. Darrelle Revis, who I think is probably the one for sure player on this list, but the corner for the Jets and the Bucks, the Patriots and the Chiefs in his career. Arguably the best corner of all time, maybe just right behind Deion Sanders. We also have Joe Thomas, the all-pro left tackle for the Browns, who spent 10 years just being the best left tackle on arguably probably the worst team in those 10 years. Zach Thomas, the linebacker for the Dolphins from 96 to 2007, and then played his last year with the Cowboys. Huge linebacker for them. DeMarcus Ware, the pass rusher for the Cowboys and also with the Broncos for a few seasons. Reggie Wayne obviously spent all those years with the Colts and Peyton Manning. Patrick Willis, although he had a shorter career, was one of the best, if not the best linebacker in all of football during his time with the 49ers. And last, Darren Woodson, the safety for the Cowboys, who played from 92 to 2003. Tony, go ahead and get us started off. Just start off with Jared Allen, obviously, because that's your guy. That's someone who's loved by everybody. And then give us some couple other players that you have on your list that you want to see be those first ballot Hall of Famers.
Yeah, absolutely. Jared Allen, who experienced most of his peak years with the Vikings here. What more can I say about him? One of the biggest personalities in the NFL. One of the greatest edge rushers of the 2000s and early 2010s. He spent a good chunk of his prime there as one of the sack leaders, if not the sack leader any given season, multi-time Pro Bowler, been on all-pro teams as well. So he is another name in a great list of defensive linemen for the Minnesota Vikings and their storied franchise. An absolute competitor. He was a huge part of that 2011 team with infamous for Brett Favre, Adrian Peterson, Percy Harvin, just to name a couple of different names. And he was arguably one of, if not the best players on that team that made a deep playoff run there. Another player that I want to talk about too is Joe Thomas. Joe Thomas might be one of the most decorated offensive tackles in all of football history. He was the gold standard of left tackle play in Cleveland for the better part of a decade. Consensus best left tackle. I'm pretty sure he made the all-decade team for the 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. He played his entire career with the Cleveland Browns, which is an accomplishment in and of itself because of the sheer mental fortitude it takes to put up with an organization that has been that historically bad during his tenure there. I feel like sometimes offensive linemen get lost in the conversation about greatest players. But if you're looking at the 2000s, the 2010s, you could say that Joe Thomas is one of the, 5 best players of that era, simply because he was so good at his position for so long. The only thing that really stopped him or hindered him in any kind of way was injuries. And despite those injuries, he did have a pretty long career and was very good, if not dominant, for almost the entire time. Really only hung it up because I think that he just didn't want to play for the Browns anymore. I'm sure he had a little bit of juice left in the tank, but he retired on his own terms. He was a all-pro and one of the best offensive tackles that football's ever seen. So I want to make sure that he's given his flowers, and I think he deserves to be, in the Hall of Fame without a doubt.
Yeah. I agree. Joe Thomas was just one of those players who he was the best left tackle without a doubt.
Yeah.
Didn't matter how bad the Browns were. Consistently, you knew that left anchor was there, and he was just one of the best. And I think he should be a lock for the Hall of Fame, because I think he is that standard of what you want from a left tackle. I had Torrey Holt on my list, and there's a lot of decorated receivers on this list. I mean, Reggie Wayne, Devin Hester, obviously more of a returner, but then you also had Andre Johnson. Why would you pick Torrey Holt? Because I think that was a player we both kind of came into an agreement before we hopped on here that was probably the one receiver we would pick. What makes Torrey Holt the more appealing pick over Reggie Wayne and Andre Johnson?
I'm not sure. I think it might just be some nostalgia from the days of The Greatest Show on Turf, and then even later into his career when he was playing with Steven Jackson, like you said, Mark Bulger for a while, Sam Bradford towards the end there. And the fact that he was able to continue to produce at an elite level with an elite quarterback and with less than elite quarterback play there. Really just kind of a rock of a receiver when you think of guys that are consistent, guys that are solid, sturdy. You're going to be able to go to them. I almost kind of want to think of him as kind of like a Keenan Allen type, where he was never the guy that was, the clear-cut consensus best receiver in the league. I think there's always been a guy or a couple of guys that were ahead of him any given season, but he was all reliable, man. And the fact that his skill and production were consistent despite multiple head coaches, despite multiple quarterbacks, despite playing in a couple of different eras, he was still able to produce consistently despite how the situation around him was evolving.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it, right on the nail about Torrey Holt. Just had that, just that nostalgia factor of he played with all those great players, but he just was just consistently good, consistently that wide receiver one for the Rams. It didn't matter who the quarterback was, who the running back was, how good they were or not. And it's kind of funny to see how different all three receivers were, because Reggie Wayne, you got the consistency of he played with Peyton Manning his entire career, and you knew what you were getting. They were going to produce. You couldn't stop it. He might not have been the flashiest receiver, but you're not stopping him. He's going to do what he wants each and every game. And he was just that with Peyton Manning each and every year. And then Andre Johnson was probably the most dominant of the three receivers, because it didn't matter who lined up against him. He was coming out to beat you. And I mean, not only is he known for beating you through the air as a receiver. He physically can beat you, as we saw against Cortland Finnegan. So he should be put in the Hall of Fame just for that alone. But let's make our case here for Devin Hester. Obviously, he's not going into the Hall of Fame for his receiving ability, although he was an underrated receiver, but his speed, his kick return, and his punt return ability. Obviously, his famous play of returning the first kick in the Super Bowl against the Colts to the house. He is and has been, and I think will always be, the most electrifying returner of all time. Do you think that's worthy of consideration to be put into the Hall of Fame, knowing that he's just that one very specific and special type of player? It wasn't so much about being the receiver or anything. It's just the fact that he could change a game with his pure return skills.
Yeah, I have always been the person to say that Devin Hester should be in the Hall of Fame, but I was very surprised to see him amongst the finalists. I was really thinking that the NFL was going to look at his role as his position as a receiver and sometimes running back too, more of a gadget player on offense. But when you look at the phase of football that Devin Hester dominated, which was special teams, outside of kickers, Devin Hester is the most impactful special teams player in NFL history. And I feel like you can say that very confidently because no other return specialist has been able to affect the game the way Devin Hester was able to for the Chicago Bears in his tenure there. And, you know, he has the record, 20 return touchdowns. That's most by any returner in NFL history. He's up there as far as return yards. You know, it looks like he returned 295 kickoff returns in his career. So the sheer volume of whatever he was able to put together as a return specialist definitely puts him in a place where he should be in the Hall of Fame because he was the best at what he did on the special teams unit there for almost his entire career. He wasn't as, dominant later on in his career, if you want to hold that against him, but no other return specialist has quite been able to replicate what he's done. Whether you look at a guy like Cordero Patterson, who has started to find his way into a more permanent role on the offense now instead of just being a return guy, but he hasn't had as many returns in the second half of his career, or someone like Dante Hall, who had a really explosive peak.
Yeah.
Like Devin Hester, but just wasn't able to put up the sheer volume that Hester did. Those are the two other guys I consider to be dominant in that same position, in that same role. And I think he clears both of them. And, the fact that he's in this list with a lot of these all-time greats really shows you, that you got to look past the stats and you got to look at the resume, the body of work. And Devin Hester stands alone in his field as the true best punt returner, kick returner.
Yeah, I think there's no denying that. And I'm glad you brought up Dante Hall and Cordero Patterson, because I was going to mention that. Does that kind of open the door for returners? And should that be, a specific skill set and specific position for the Hall of Fame?
Absolutely.
I would think if you put Devin Hester and I don't want to just start throwing any returner in there, but yeah, when you look at players like Dante Hall and Cordero Patterson, they were electrifying. They changed the games with their return ability. And Patterson holds the record now for the most kick return touchdowns. And Dante Hall obviously was more of a punt returner, but he did it as a kick returner too. Do you think those are players that deserve of the Hall of Fame? Or let me ask you, if that was a position where, hey, returners are now Hall of Famer, if you were that great of a returner, Do you think those two belong in that kind of list with Devin Hester? And then one other player, just because he was a player that we saw, how do you feel about Joshua Cribbs?
Well, you got to throw Cribbs in there real quick, too. I think that if you're going to put kickers in the Hall of Fame, you ought to put kick returners, punt returners, who I would consider to be the other predominant special teams position.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not sure if I'm trying to put long snappers or gunners in the Hall of Fame, despite their contributions and how important they are. I'm not sure about that, but I think you have to give some more love to the special teams guys for sure in all-time conversations. As far as those other three guys that you listed, off the top of my head, if I had to list them, I'd say Patterson is the second greatest returner. Dante Hall would be third, and I'd have Josh Cribbs after them. I think if they would have let Tyreek Hill return more kicks, he could be the true double threat, right? And that's kind of like the knock on this position is that if they're good in the receiving game, they don't get those touches in special teams anymore because they're too valuable to get hurt.
Yeah.
And, that's the big knock on Hester is that he wasn't that good on the offensive side as a receiver or a gadget player, anything that he was really doing. The stats don't back up what you would expect a Hall of Fame career to look like. But I hope this opens up the door for other returners. I feel like Devin Hester is the exception, not the rule right now when it comes to returners in the Hall of Fame. I don't think we're going to see anyone else that's played their career or is still finishing up their career get there. Now in 10, 15, 20 years, we could see somebody that, is able to surpass these four and really elevate the kick return game to another level, which would be awesome. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see a guy that can give you, big seasons of 5+ kick return touchdowns a year and really push the position to another level. But for now, I think it's a big win for football to see Devin Hester at least be in the finalists. We'll see if he makes it. I'll be really happy for him if he does, but I could also see a world where he's more of an honorable mention than actually getting the jacket, unfortunately, just with how the Hall of Fame usually tends to lean.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would love to see him make it. And, being a returner, it kind of is a lost art, which I think makes Patterson's accomplishments that much better. But I think it's great to see him being a finalist because, like you said, I think it kind of shows, how great of a returner he was, that he altered games just by doing that and not even having an effect as a receiver or a gadget player. Let's talk a little bit about Patrick Willis because he had probably the shortest career of the finalists here, but he was just so good, so dominant in his short, 7-year career, I believe, with the 49ers. Do you think he's someone who makes it, or do you think the fact that, he didn't play as many years is a knock on him? Because he would have,
if he would have played more if he would have played like another season or two, I feel like we don't even have this conversation of does this affect whether or not he's a Hall of Fame player? Because Barry Sanders didn't play. What did he play? 9 years, 10 years?
I think 9 or 10 years. Yeah, I think it was 10 years, 10 seasons.
Yeah. And so 7 is a significantly shorter amount of seasons as opposed to Barry Sanders. But we never questioned if Barry Sanders is going to be in the Hall of Fame. We questioned if Barry Sanders is the greatest running back of all time. And that's a legitimate debate. we could talk about it right now. Him, Walter Payton, Emmitt Smith. Who's the best out of those three? But with Patrick Willis, his peak, his era of dominance was unquestionable. Those 7 years, he was phenomenal. And he played in the same league as Ray Lewis. And I believe Brian Urlacher was still playing, other great middle linebackers, and he was able to leave his stamp on the game in seven seasons. So if he played 9 seasons, he'd be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But the fact that he only played 7, I think it just pushes it into that gray zone of, well, I mean, your career lasted just as long as the Seahawks dynasty did. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
It was 7 years. I mean, that's 1/3 of Tom Brady's career, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe another year or two, I'd say absolutely. But now I feel like it's kind of on the fence.
Yeah, I think the fact that, like you said, he only played 7 seasons is a big knock, because you look at some of these other players and they were good for, 9, 10, 11 seasons. Look at Zach Thomas, DeMarcus Ware. I mean, obviously they weren't the same players that they were earlier in their primes, but there were players that were still extremely good even into the older days.
Yeah, they were able to be impactful.
Exactly. Even if it was that situational. But kind of like you said with Barry Sanders, even though he played a lot less years than all these other running backs, it's not a question on if he's a Hall of Famer. It's if he's the greatest of all time. And when I think of Patrick Willis, I don't think, hey, is he the best of all time, or is he in the conversation for the best middle linebacker of all time? And he's not quite in that conversation for me yet. So I think that's kind of my knock on why he wouldn't, or maybe he quite shouldn't be a first ballot quite yet. And don't get me wrong, I loved Patrick Willis. I watched him play his entire career.
Absolutely.
And I want him to be a Hall of Famer, and I want him to get in. And that's not me trying to be negative.
If I was going to build a perfect middle linebacker, I'd probably start somewhere with Patrick Willis. Yeah. He had a crazy 40-yard dash time for a middle linebacker. I think he ran like a 4.6 or something insane like that, or 4.5, like really fast for a middle linebacker. He was athletic. He was tall. He was built. He was smart. He could read offenses. He could play coverage. He could play the run. He could rush the quarterback. Like, literally could do it all.
Yeah.
And he could only do it for 7 seasons, man. It sucks that his career wasn't as long, because it would have been amazing to see him continue to play on, especially with the way that the 49ers organization has been able to transition with a great defense still after his retirement. I mean, it's not far-fetched to say that he wouldn't have been able to play with other great defensive talent in San Francisco if he would have stayed around, been one of those veteran guys that plays for 12, 13 seasons and is able to still be impactful. I understand that, he has his personal reasons for wanting to do so. I think it was an injury-related reason, or a health-related reason, so I completely understand that, for the sake of him, but for the sake of, wanting to see the best football, I think it would have been amazing if he was able to play a longer career and really kind of continue to make his stamp on the game.
Yeah. He reminds me a lot of Luke Kuechly in a sense.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you that. Who would you rather take,
Let's
Luke
get into
Kuechly
it.
or Patrick Willis?
Luke Kuechly.
Same. Me too. Luke Kuechly was just... Respectfully. He was just so good, man. Just on a different level.
My dream linebacking core my dream defense is a 3-4 with Luke Kuechly and Patrick Willis as my 2 interior linebackers, though.
Look, I love that you said that, because I think I want to make a segment where all 4 of us give our favorite lineups on like who would our starters be. And
Oh yeah,
because I love doing that. I used to do that, growing up with my cousin BJ playing Madden. I used to do that with Blake.
yeah,
And it's cool to not only think of what players you guys see as like the best in your eyes, but players that you also like. You're not just choosing the absolute best. You're choosing someone that you think is good and that, has a connection to you. Because I would personally run a 4-3 defense, so I would pick my players based off of that. But yeah, we'll definitely have to do that. Any last Hall of Fame players that we want to touch on? I mean, I know we mentioned a little bit about all of them. DeMarcus Ware, I think, is probably one of my choices as a first ballot. He was just so dominant for so long with the Cowboys, and even in his older days with the Broncos, he still had success with them, and he was good there.
absolutely.
So I definitely think
DeMarcus,
he's a player.
I think if there's 3 players I know for sure that are going to be first ballot Hall of Famers, it's going to be DeMarcus Ware, Joe Thomas, and Darrelle Revis. I just think those 3 guys left the biggest impact of the game out of this list of 15 players that we see here.
Yeah.
I will say it's really close between those 3 receivers. But one player I just want to give a quick salute to, because seeing their name really brings me back, and I'm really happy to see them here as well. That's Dwight Freeney.
Yeah.
I just like Dwight Freeney, man. Like, I just do. I think he's really good. What he had like a signature pass rush move too. I forgot if it was the swing move or the spin move.
Yeah.
His spin, didn't he like leap off of 2 feet for the spin move? They did like a whole sport science episode about it. He is so good. He was good for so long too. Like people say that, and you said all those teams he played for later in his career. I feel like he was pretty good on all of them, especially that Cardinals team. He was on like the Carson Palmer Cardinals team that made an NFC Championship game randomly that one year with Bruce Arians as the head coach. And I just remember, I thought that team was so fun because there's all these players that were good in like 2008 on other teams.
Mm-hmm.
Teaming up together with Larry Fitzgerald to try and win a ring. With all the hype that year with Cam Newton, I wanted the Cardinals to be the team to make it to the Super Bowl that year.
Yeah,
I was low key rooting for them hard. I just thought it was kind of funny, all these like vets coming together to try and win a ring together in Arizona. It just didn't work out. But shouts out to Dwight Freeney. I think he's super slept on. He was a great pass rusher.
Yeah, man. He was just, again, part of that Colts era of just consistently good players.
Mm-hmm.
Each and every season. And you can't really go wrong with them because like we said, they just did it so consistently. So
you know who was also really good on that Colts team? I'm gonna derail you real quick one last time. Bob Sanders.
Bob Sanders was good. Bob Sanders was great. Robert Mathis.
That's another name I was thinking of. He was really good too.
Dallas Clark.
Where Dallas Clark. That's a name that doesn't get brought up enough. Yeah. The Colts, man, how far they fell off. But then it's like, dude, they had like 6 future Hall of Famers on their team.
Talking about players like Patrick Willis who retired early, Luke Kuechly. What about Andrew Luck, man?
What could have been? I liked Luck too.
Look, to me, he was the original Josh Allen. I mean, you could say even Big Ben was like the original Josh Allen, but Andrew Luck was that one prospect, I don't know, that I could remember coming out of college that everybody loved. And he was just so athletic, so strong, so smart, had a cannon of an arm, was accurate, was friendly. Like, he was just the whole package. And he literally brought the Colts out of nothing and made them into something. And, good for him for making the right decision for himself. But, man, it would have been great to see what Andrew Luck could have done with the longer career.
And the thing is, hindsight is 2020, and who knows if things would have shaken up the same way. But isn't it kind of a bitch that the Colts are a quarterback away, or at least we think that they are? We've been thinking they are. Like if he would have just waited like 3 years, he could have had a good O-line and a good defense. Like, he wouldn't have. They don't really got weapons. I don't think Pittman Jr. is that great. I don't think Mo Alley Cox is that great.
Better than what
I think Jonathan. True, but he could have had a good running game, a good O-line, and a pretty decent defense. He would have had to deal with the Colts bullshit for another 3-4 seasons, but
yeah, man.
Andrew Luck could have been a Hall of Fame quarterback if someone would have just protected him, man.
Yeah, I mean, he's all skinny now, he's nowhere near football shape, but even now, I feel like if he got into football shape and he told people that he wanted to come back, so many teams would pick up the phone to call him. I still think that. So, that being said, I think that pretty much wraps up this episode. I want to thank you guys again for tuning in. I know it's kind of a weird episode with having Blake and Pete not here, and obviously with the crazy week that we had with Damar Hamlin, with the crazy week that we have coming up with literally the last week of the season before we get into the playoffs. So we're really getting to the thick of it, to the end of it, and it's only going to start heating up from here on out. So again, thank you guys for tuning in, for our viewers, for our listeners, and we hope to see you guys next week for the next week's episode.